Hello YouTube, my name is Tony and I am a writer. My pen name is R.A. Miller and I began my professional career in writing back in 2012. Over the past 6 years I feel like I've learned a lot, and my goal is to share what I have learned with you in the hopes that it will make you a better writer. So what we're going to be talking about today is how to write a killer first line when you are writing a book. That's what we're going to be going over today. So you're writing a story, you're writing a book, and that first line can oftentimes, trip up, a writer. They're trying to figure out, exactly, what to say. What do I say to, hook my readers? I have just a short amount of time in order to get their interest to keep them going for the entire rest of the book. And what we're going to do today is we're going to go over some examples of how to go about doing that, of other people who are more successful than I am, and we're gonna look at what they've done, and I'm even going to use a few of my own examples for some of the books that I have written. So give me just a second here. I'm going to do a new file here so I can take some notes. So we're going to take some notes here. So the first thing that we're going to want to talk about is the first step, I guess, would be to not overthink it. Don't overthink the process of writing that first line. It should come to you naturally, and if it's not coming to you naturally, I would recommend going to another part of the story. I read in this thing I found on the internet, I can't remember where it's at, but Pixar was talking about how to write a good story, and one of the things they said to focus on was to get the ending right. The ending is sometimes the most difficult part in writing a book, and if you can get the ending right, you can fix all the rest of it. Go to another part of the book. Skip past that opening line and just start the chapter. Don't worry so much about hooking the reader. That's what revision is for. That's what editing is for. That's what storyboarders are for. Sometimes you're going to hit it off right off the bat, and you're not going to have a hard time with it. And then other people, they might actually struggle with that. Personally, with my writing, I struggle with the mid-book lull, keeping their interest going throughout the book. Like once you really get into it, that is one of the areas where I kind of fall short as a writer. I feel like I'm decent at starting and I'm decent at ending, and my weakness is the beginning, or I'm sorry, in the middle. The beginnings usually flows for me, so I'm actually going to use a few examples. I'm actually going to use some examples of authors who have published books, and I'll also use a few of my own. The first one I want to talk about here is Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone, which if you're a writer or reader and you don't know who Harry Potter is, I honestly don't really know what to say there. But the J.K. Rowling, what she did with this is, it says, Mr. and Mrs. Dursley of number 4 Privet Drive were proud to say that they were perfectly normal. Thank you very much. They were the last people you'd expect to be involved in anything strange or mysterious because they just didn't hold with such nonsense. Okay, so that first paragraph, not a big hook in there. They introduce a couple characters and, nothing really out of the ordinary that makes me want to continue reading. But what does make me want to continue reading is the title of the chapter. I feel personally that she does not really need a hook in here because of this, The Boy Who Lived. I remember when I first got my hands on this book and I saw these words right here, I was immediately entranced. I wanted to know the boy who lived from what? Okay, so I had to keep reading. I was compelled to read, and it's one of the most, honestly, epic first chapters in any book that has ever been written. Pretty much from that point on, you're just going to finish the book. There's not even a question. Another one that I'm going to talk about is from one of my favorite authors, and he's a big inspiration for me as a fantasy writer and author myself, and that would be Brandon Sanderson. And I'm going to quote a couple of his books here. I actually have them in front of me. I don't have them on the screen right now, but I have his copy of The Way of Kings. And in the beginning of the book, in the prologue, I'm not going to get into chapter 1, but in the prologue, and I might be mispronouncing some of these names, but it says, Zeth Sunsun Valano, truthless of Shinovar, wore white on the day he was to kill a king. Okay. Now we're going to talk about Elantris, also by Brandon Sanderson. And the very first line, I got to find it here. Give me just a second. Bear with me. The first line of chapter 1, and again, I might mispronounce his name, Prince Rowden of Arellan awoke early that morning, completely unaware that he had been damned for all eternity. Wow, holy crap. Okay. And then the last one that I'm going to do here for other authors, it would be from J.R.R. Tolkien, the very first chapter of Lord of the Rings, Fellowship of the Ring. And I'm just going to get right into chapter 1. I just need to find it here. Bear with me again. So it's chapter 1, A Long Expected Party, and the very first line is, when Mr. Bilbo Baggins of Bag End announced that he would shortly be celebrating his 11th birthday with a party of special magnificence, there was much talk and excitement in Hobbiton. Okay, couple more examples. I'm going to use some of my own work here. I have one of my books is called The Deism Paragon, and in the prologue it says, no one comes back from the broken cliffs. Another one of my books, The Ghost in the Attic, in the prologue, the very first line is, Annie, you need to wake up. And that's dialogue, just right at the very outset. Annie, you need to wake up. A familiar voice called out. It was certainly urgent. I have another book, which is my sci-fi novel called The Hunters. The very start of the book says, they're on our tail. And it's an exclamation. And those are the 3 examples that I had. Now, my question to you is, what do all of these examples have in common? You haven't figured out? They all have in common is that they are asking the reader a question. That's what they're doing. They're asking the reader a question. And it doesn't even have to be a question that is going to span the entire theme of the book. They are hooking them by getting them to wonder something. A few of these examples, in Elantris, it talks about, Prince Rowden waking up, not even know he was damned for all eternity. Well, why was he damned for all eternity? You have to keep reading to find out. In The Way of Kings, Szeth talks about Szeth, getting ready to kill a king. Well, okay, wow, sounds like a huge deal. Why is he going to be killing this king? In The Lord of the Rings, Fellowship of the Ring, why is this guy 111 years old? That doesn't even make sense, so you have to keep reading to find out. In the Deism Paragon, no one comes back from the broken cliffs. Okay, well, why? Why does no one come back from the broken cliffs? What's happened there? The Ghost in the Attic. Annie, you need to wake up. Why is she being told to wake up? What's so urgent that's, causing that to happen? And in The Hunters, they're on our tail. Well, who's on their tail? Like, I need to read a little bit more to find out. That is what you need to do. You need to force your reader to ask a question. Or you need to give, basically, I'm stumbling, sorry. This is my first video, so I'm a little bit nervous. But that's what you're doing. You're getting your reader to ask a question about the writing, and that is how you start with a reasonably good first line. That's how you get that hook in there. You have to get them to ask a question. So step 1 would be not to overthink it. Step 2 would be they are asking the reader a question. You got to get your reader to ask a question. Now, if, I read a book and it starts out talking about, like, let's say it's a fantasy novel and it starts out talking about, giant trees and, it talks about the landscape and yada, yada, yada. Honestly, that's not really going to hook me. Now, I will give it some more time, to see if it's going to pick up. But if you want to do it right at the outset, right out the gate, you need to get the reader to ask a question. And that's the general theme here. And I've learned this just by, reading, books and, spending time in literature. That is how it's done. I know the first line of the Heir of Justice, which is actually right here, I have it published on Amazon. The very first line of that book is "pick it up!" exclamation point, and it's dialogue said by a father to a son. Okay, well, pick what up? What's going on here? And you read a little bit more, and you find out that the two are actually fighting one another, and that's where that comes in. You have to hook them by getting them to ask a question. You have to compel them to want to read on a little bit further. So that, I guess, is it for my first lesson. I should have planned a little bit more to talk about for this. So we'll go ahead and end this video here. If you like the video, go ahead and hit like and subscribe. And we'll see you for the next video.